Hello, everybody. Welcome back. My name is Bradley, and you are listening to Consecrated Media. I am recording this in the dead of night, and it is raining a little bit right outside my wall. So if you hear the occasional pitter-patter of rain, this is not an ASMR podcast. This is Consecrated Media. In today's episode, I am going to be going in-depth on my thoughts on the latest project from John Mark McMillan, as well as sharing my thoughts on the Half Alive concert that I went to this weekend. But before I get into that, here is the latest news. Last Friday was a really big day for Christian alternative music. We got 3 albums from 3 pretty significant artists, one of whom is John Mark McMillan, who released 2 versions of his new album Cosmic Supreme, which has been a long time coming, and I will be breaking that down later in this episode, obviously. And then John Guerra released his new album, Jesus, which I'll be talking about next week. Looking forward to that. Make sure you stay tuned. I have a special guest for that episode. And an album from Amen Radio and Joel Houston called The Profound Foolishness of Approximately Sign, which I can only assume means the profound foolishness of approximation, but I'm not 100% on that. Black Country's new Road, Forever How Long, also came out on Friday, as well as a new album from Jane Remover. Aside from those people, Pink Panthers, the Marias, Sparks, and Levy have all also put some new music into the world this week. My track of the week is going to be Gethsemane from John Guerra's new album. This is a beautiful standalone track, but I highly encourage that you listen to the entire album instead of starting there. And again, I will be talking about that album next week. It is awesome. Please stay tuned for that episode. For film and television news this week, we'll be starting off with some very heavy, very sad news, which is that Val Kilmer passed away this week. He was a legend, and he had been fighting throat cancer for almost, or maybe more than a decade before his death. To me, personally, his work as Moses and as God during the burning bush scene in The Prince of Egypt is one of the finest voice acting performances in any animated movie pretty much ever, and that has been a really pivotal film in my life. So he's going to be missed. He was a really important actor. Yeah. And then on a completely different note that feels quite irreverent to shift to, the Minecraft movie is dominating the box office right now, which is so very goofy. And The Chosen is also doing pretty well, having taken 3rd place in the North American box office this past week. And the other most interesting film news I could scrounge up for this week is that the cast of Sam Mendes's 4 Beatles biopic movies have just been announced. I won't break down all the actors in those roles, but what I can say is that those choices have been hated on. Some people are really upset about it. I myself, being a Beatles fan, will just say that I am very cautious but optimistic. I think these actors could give some really solid performances as the 4 Beatles. And that right there was the news for this week. I will see you just after these beeps and these boops. Hello everybody, glad you made it past the intro and the news segment for this episode. As I mentioned in the news segment, Friday was a huge day for alternative Christian music. John Mark McMillan, one of the most important Christian artists of this current period of Christian alternative music. He dropped an album called Cosmic Supreme, and another very important artist, John Guerra, who we have talked about before, also dropped an album. Both of these albums are about Jesus, which is very cool and gives me a lot to think and talk about, but today I want to talk about John Mark McMillan and his album Cosmic Supreme. So, in case you don't know who John Mark McMillan is, I'll give you a really basic rundown. So, he's been a bit of a mainstay in the behind-the-scenes alternative Christian songwriters universe, you could say. He's been making music for a long, long time. Well, he's not like old, but he's been making music since, I want to say, 2002. He's been a Christian songwriter who's written a lot of really famous worship songs that you probably know either through his version or through cover versions. Songs like How He Loves, and in his version, he says, heaven meets earth like a sloppy wet kiss. And in the David Crowder version, and probably every other version they changed it to soft and wet kiss. So, you be the judge. Is the John Mark McMillan version better? I think so, because it's funnier. Anyways, King of My Heart is his most popular song. That one got covered by Bethel Music. Skeleton Bones, Death in His Grave, A lot of really legendary worship songs from like the late 2000s, early 2010s. But yeah, he's one of my favorite alternative Christian artists. I would say his albums, The Medicine and Borderlands, are two of my favorite Christian albums ever. The Medicine in particular is really just a powerful, I don't want to say edgy because it is a Christian album, but it's got a certain grit to it that I haven't really been able to find in many other Christian releases. So I highly recommend you check both of those out. I think The Medicine is just an essential Christian album from its era. 2009, I believe, is when it was released, 2008 or 9. And then, if you don't have time to check those out before you check out Cosmic Supreme, all I want you to do, go to YouTube, go to Spotify, whatever, look for How He Loves, the live 2009 performance. I'm sure you know this song. I'm sure you might know the David Crowder version of it. But even if you do, just listen to this. Because this is pretty much my favorite worship song, like contemporary worship song ever. This specific performance, just the energy here, like it's such a beautiful expression of submission to God, God's sovereignty. It's just so powerful, so beautiful. It's an unbelievable performance, and that really kind of gives context to who John Mark McMillan is, why he's important. So his new album, Cosmic Supreme, is an album that is all about Jesus. It is all about the need we have as humans, not just as Christians, but as humans, the need we have for something beyond us, what he calls a cosmic supreme, and that he says he's been looking for all his life. It's really an album that yearns for the childlike simplicity of true worship, and there's a post he made on Instagram a couple months ago when he released one of the singles for this album, and I'm just going to read through that to give you some context about what that means. Something strange happened to me when I was 7 years old. I was goofing off in chapel during the special music when, without warning, I found myself sobbing uncontrollably. I should have been embarrassed, but I wasn't. I wasn't even sad, but I felt like the whole universe was in love with me, and I was in love with everyone in it. Surrounded by wood paneling and the soft rise of adult contemporary keyboard, I was sure that I'd discovered how to feel God. Almost 40 years later, I still have no better explanation for it. There are cynics, of course, who'd like to say I was manipulated, but if I was, the world could use a lot more of this kind of manipulation, because I found a deep love and gratitude for my Maker and every person I'd ever met. My whole life, I have looked for that feeling. I learned to find it when I write songs and dreamt that you could feel it too whenever you hear them. And you know, if in the end it's all a grand illusion, as our more disenchanted critics have suggested, if I've simply manipulated you into feeling a love for God and your neighbor, then please know that I am sincerely not sorry. Not at all. So, for my part, I think he expresses that really well through this album. You know, it manages to succeed in a genre, contemporary Christian worship, that I usually don't care for. I often even dislike, but it works really well. What it reminds me of the most, I would say, is Need to Breathe at their best, like songs like Wasteland and Multiplied. And then sonically, it finds some nostalgia through 80s instrumentation and very subtle synthscapes and repeated choruses that work really well without being on the nose or corny about their inclusion in the album. Overall, this album just emphasizes the human need for and draw to the beauty and the ultimate rest that we can only find in Christ. What I'm going to do here is give you a little bit of context for where this album came from. So, after he had his success, I believe it was after the album Borderlands specifically, or maybe after Live at the Night, John stepped back from writing worship music specifically. He focused more on, I guess, just indie rock sort of stuff. His past few albums have been much more of a casual listening. It's not built for the congregation to sing. You know, and the reasons he gives for having quit worship music at that time is that it just felt dishonest to him. He didn't want to be doing it for money. It felt irresponsible, and he had other things on his mind. But in 2023, his wife had 5 surgeries, and his father and his father-in-law both were battling various medical issues. And during that time, he felt inspired by these very simple just praise choruses, basically. And as time went on, these praise choruses stuck with him, and although he didn't originally intend to record them, he says he felt like they deserved a home, and that's something I've really empathized with as I've listened to this album. What he described it as on Instagram is remembering how good it feels to love God without ego or cynicism. He was allowed to find beauty in the mystery, depth, and even the silliness of God like he did when he was 7. So what he says before going into this album is, I hope you'll take a break from cynicism and lean back into the mystery of God again with me. So bear that in mind as I break this down. So what I'm going to do is just share my thoughts on pretty much each track. What I will say as I'm beginning is that the first three are unequivocally my favorites. So the very first song is Ancient Love, and this song was released as a single before the album, so I've known this one for a few months, and I've been coming back to it. It encapsulates the successes of this album very well. I love the gated reverb on the drums just moving around in the back of the mix. The restated chorus of I can feel the aching of an ancient love, I can feel the aching of your heart again, is just exactly what I was talking about earlier, or exactly what he was saying earlier, I guess, it's just a return to the wonder of the faith of childhood, the need we have for this ancient love of Christ. The song is very epic. It's all about the human need for something beyond us. This is where the titular cosmic supreme term comes up. It's a really gorgeous song. I think maybe not my favorite, but if I had to pick one best song from this album, or one that you should check out to understand what the efforts of this album are moving towards, it's this one, All My Life. The chorus is beautiful. It's just, he's saying, I have wanted you all my life. It reminds me of something that Chase mentioned last week about our seeking for beauty, which can ultimately only be fulfilled through Christ. You know, everything we look for can be a reflection of the beauty, but our ultimate source of beauty is Christ. That's what we want all our lives. Sort of like C.S. Lewis's testimony in Surprised by Joy, where he describes his yearning for what he calls joy, the supreme joy, throughout his life, and ultimately the only way he finds that is through God, and that is the basis for his proof for God later on in life. Unrelated to the lyrical content, one of my favorite musical moments on the album is the very soft intro, and then once he says the words Cosmic Supreme, there's this little shift in the chord progression. It's just so mysterious, it's so beautiful, and as the song builds, I love its wall of sound. The guitar sort of shreds later on over top of the chorus. I really love it. This is a beautiful song. And then my favorite song on the album is going to be the next one, which is called Beauty of the Lord. This one reads like a psalm. I'm not sure whether it is based off of a psalm. I wouldn't be surprised at all. I should have done more research about it. But yeah, this is conceivably, pretty much definitely at this point, my personal favorite song from the album. It's very uniquely chill. It very immediately demonstrates the album's 80s production using its drum beat, spacey bass line, and it's got these little chime synths at the beginning. Yeah, this song just sounds fantastic. It's a really, really cool sonic palette for a worship song. I love the chorus in which he just says, I've been born again into a house of many wonders. I've been saved by the beauty of the Lord. Because that's really... it's kind of like beating a dead horse at this point, but, you know, the beauty of the Lord is what our hearts desire. And then later in the song, he touches on that theme of just childlike worship and removing cynicism in saying, I surrender to your heart again. I brought it up before on this podcast, I think in the episode with Jared, but the shakah, the state of worship from the heart, or the heart position of worship is the proper term, sorry. That's key. You know, we can have our personal preferences in music, we can have our tastes, but what it comes down to is this music for God? Are you listening to this for God? Or are you listening to this for you? And we can be very critical, we can be very cynical, but I love this album because it's emphasizing that we need to remove that. Not all the time maybe, but in worshiping God, we are to lay ourselves bare and just surrender our hearts to His. And then as that section progresses, the I surrender to your heart again, there's a really gorgeous choral section. And as I so unfortunately said about Toby Mac's album, which I said did not take me to church, this choral section does take me to church. So yeah, Beauty of the Lord, definitely my highlight here. And then I'll talk about the songs Heart's Delight and Born from Love together, because those are both songs that feature John's wife, Sarah. They're not exactly my favorites. They both have really beautiful moments, and I like them the longer they build, but they're also definitely the simplest, just most normal worship songs, which doesn't inherently make them bad, but I think sonically they do the least for me. On Heart's Delight, I do need to say, I love the saxophone section. I distinctly enjoy it when it interplays with the little brassy synth right before the Reveling You section begins. And I also want to say his son is playing saxophone, his 16-year-old son, and that's awesome. Glad his son has that opportunity. And then on Born from Love, the lyrics are nice. content is good, but it's a worship song. Doesn't sound super interesting compared to my favorite songs on the album. For both of these songs, I would really just say I wouldn't listen to this over any of the first 3 tracks of the album, which do the same things, but I think they just do them in a better way. And then the song And It Rages, which is sandwiched between those two, is probably my least favorite on the album. It's a good song, but same criticism in that I just think the first 3 do it best, and it's a cool song. It's about how the ancient and eternal power of the Holy Spirit interacts with our view of beauty. Has a little hammered piano part, which is just thrilling to me. Again, it's not a bad song. I wouldn't say it's a highlight of mine, but what I will say is that this is some of the finest lyrical content of the album. Most of the other songs on the album are more of the same. Back to the Garden, again, has some of the best lyrics on the album. I enjoy the subtleties of the production on that one. Holy Powers, very cool piano power ballad song. I love the way the very earthy instrumentals combine with just an escalating, very slow build. And then the closer, Easy Burden, is a fantastic closer because it's really a call to anybody who hasn't found this rest in the cosmic supremacy of Christ. You know, if you are searching for this beauty or this cosmic supreme, Christ offers a solution to that yearning, and his burden is light. He will give you rest. And then the last song I want to talk about on the album, although I have already talked about the closer, is track number 7, which is Anyone Else. My notes for this song were, oh yeah, we're so back. A song all about the power of God. It's all about our futility in the face of it and our need for him. It's arguably the simplest song on the album in terms of content, but I think that's part of why it works so well and why this album works so well. He takes something simple, but he makes it hit hard using the instrumentals and the biblically sound and beautiful and powerful lyrics. And all of those components hit really hard when the instrumental kicks in and the All the Years Will Find Us section happens. It might be the best example on the album of a return to that intimate, childlike experience of simple worship. And those are my thoughts on all the tracks from Cosmic Supreme. I should also mention that on the same day, John Mark McMillan released a second version of this called Cosmic Supreme Supreme, and that has a few live versions, acoustic versions, and instrumental versions of a few of these tracks. Overall, my thoughts on this album are that after having revisited a few times to make this episode, I really love it. This is such a nuanced approach to worship without being overly complex or overstaying its welcome with cliches and basic instrumentation. It takes the kind of worship that you hear at summer camp, and it makes that simultaneously personal yet powerful. It does exactly what it needs to do in a very thought-provoking yet faith-strengthening way. You could listen to this music to meditate on the things of God, as well as sing this with a crowd. It would be a really fantastic album to see live due to its biblically rich, powerful choruses and the walls of sound that remind me of classic old-school John Mark McMillan, like Live at the Night and the live tracks from the Medicine era. Speaking of seeing him live, he will be touring, and that tour will be starting on May 5th. He's touring with the band Citizens. I'm going to be seeing them on the kickoff tour in Atlanta. I'm very excited for that. So that is Cosmic Supreme. I would say this is one of my favorite Christian worship albums, probably my favorite of this decade. So I highly recommend you check it out if you are tired of, I won't name names, but you know, those one-word worship organizations. Gosh darn it. At my church this weekend, the sermon we heard was all about the issue of man in the face of culture and how we have too high a view of man and too much value is placed on self-esteem when our only worth really is in Christ. And I re-listened to this album after having heard that sermon, and it was really a perspective shifter for me. You know, our role is not to elevate ourselves and to get our way, but it is to submit to this awesome power of God and his perfect will, his supreme will, his cosmic supreme will, if you will. So there you have it. And then I also would like to briefly cover a concert that I got to see this weekend, which is the band Half Alive. So Half Alive, if you don't know who they are just an indie pop band. They are, in fact, Christian. But I would say bands like Hippocampus, Coin, Dayglow, and heck, 21 Pilots, artists like that. If you like them, you will probably like Half Alive. I was a big fan of theirs back in the day, in 2018, when their big hit Still Feel came onto the scene. So I know that era of their music, their first EP and their first album, I know very well. And then after that, I have not really been super up to date with their music, but a couple friends of mine were going to the concert, so I tagged along, and I'm thankful to say I really enjoyed it. The energy was there. I think a lot of their fan base, much like 21 Pilots, are people who are diehard fans of the band, who know the music really well and are very passionate about it. And because of that, it was a good environment. Everyone was really happy to be there, and I enjoyed it a lot. It was a smaller venue, and everyone was jumping. The lead singer did a crowd surf, actually, which I have never been in a concert where the lead singer did a crowd surf, let alone went right over me. So that was a fun experience, and aside from that, the band was really tight. All the songs sounded great. Very solid mix of their old and new music. I was glad they pulled out some of the old ones, since that is what I know. They also debuted a new song, which sounded great. So I very much enjoyed the sound of the concert. They had great stage presence as well. One thing that Half Alive has always incorporated in their music videos and their concerts is this certain style of choreographed dancing, which, since this is in fact an auditory medium, I will not bother describing to you, but it's very cool. You should definitely look up some of their music videos and see what I'm talking about. The two dancers that they had in their concert were phenomenal. They really brought the concert together, made it feel unique, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. I will definitely not forget that. But if you are a Christian, I would say definitely if you're like a middle schooler or a teenager, hasn't been to many concerts, I think this would be a really fun one to start with. This is just a very fun band, very wholesome band, good crowd of people. It's very safe. And Half Alive is just a really solid band. I would love to talk about their first album for a future episode. We shall see if that happens anytime soon. And that is about all I have to share with you guys today. In conclusion, I highly recommend that you check out John Mark McMillan and his new album Cosmic Supreme. It is one of my favorite worship albums of recent years. Very powerful album, but doesn't feel on the nose about it. And then I also highly recommend Half Alive for a good, fun Christian concert that you should go to if you can. Anyways, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week. And again, please stay tuned for next week's episode. I'm really excited about it, and I think you guys are going to really enjoy it. All right, I will see you then. This has been Consecrated Media. Did you enjoy this episode? Want to hear more of this? Please let me know by leaving a rating or review wherever you get your podcasts, and feel free to interact with me over on Instagram at consecrated.media. And everybody, keep it snazzy.